What's up, everyone? NanMan here with another modern meta breakdown video. So if you have not been paying attention to what's been going on in modern, I feel like the last month, or give or take, because things have changed, but pretty much it's all been about companions. It has since changed with the hot fix. I feel like that's the term we can use since the Magic is a digital game more than paper, whatever. Anyway, Companion is a thing that lets you basically have a new card in your sideboard that gets to be able to be added to your hand. It used to just be a thing that you could have. It was like your eighth card in your hand, essentially, in a lot of ways. But they have since hot fixed it, so you'd have to pay 3 mana to be able to add it to your hand. And then you pay whatever its converted mana costs. So over the last month, it was pretty much all Luris, being able to play cards with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard once per turn. Like it was, seeing a lot of play in older formats as well, like Vintage, being able to be like, all right, here's a Black Lotus, and I'm going to play that Black Lotus again because why not? Now, Luris has since moved from sideboard or the companion slot into a lot of main deck. So we're not going to be talking about Luris decks this week. We're going to be talking about a deck that still is using the companion mechanic. So that leads us to a value deck that we have talked about previously on the show. We've talked about it over the last couple of years because it's existed over the last couple of years, and it's basically taken the place as a value Splinter Twin-esque deck, Splinter Twin adjacent, because sadly Splinter Twin is still banned in Modern. That's how it goes. So this one can do the same thing of making infinite number of creatures to kill your opponent, but it's also a value-based deck because of just the value creatures that it has in it. So the way that the companion that we're going to be talking about is Yorion, which, for those that might not be familiar, Yorion is a card that lets us basically flicker stuff. So let's pull it up here. Bam, there's our Yorion. So the way the companion works is you have to have your starting deck be 80 cards or 20 cards more than the starting total number. So normally you have to have 60 card decks. With Yorion, your deck has 80. If you've played any of the standard or historic or anything like that, there's been Yorion decks running around. Not as much anymore since they nerfed him, hotfixed him, whatever term you want to use to list down how they changed companion. But he still exists, and so I wanted to highlight him because it's a sweet card, right? So whenever he enters the battlefield, you can exile any number of non-land permanents you own, and then guess what? They get a return to the battlefield at the beginning of the next end step. So again, that flicker effect that we're talking about. We're going to highlight Kiki Jiki, if you guys couldn't tell from the way that we've been describing it. So let's hop over. We'll talk about the deck. We'll talk about the value of the cards and why this is the home for Yorion in Modern, and why, if you're going to play Kiki Jiki, why not just add 20 more cards in? All right, so here's the list that we see. There are, of course, other lists that have been popping up. This one is kind of one of the most recent ones, going 5-0 at the MTGO event, because Modern Leagues are pretty much the way it is right now because there's a pandemic going on and people don't want to be outside as much. And, safety first, guys. So you're on here. We talked about what it does. We talked about how it works. So as a companion, you can pay 3 mana, it gets added to your hand. And then you now have that card in your hand. You can pay 5, boom, bring them on out, and you can start flickering things. So you would think, okay, ETB type effects make a lot of sense. I can kind of value it out. So there are cards that exist in here that pay attention and care about that, right? So you can kind of start to highlight it, look through the list and kind of see what those are, and we'll highlight those cards first. But before we jump too deep into it, I do want to let you guys know that this is technically a 4-color list, mainly just because of sideboard cards, having Kaya's Guile and being able to have Sin Collector. You don't have to run those in the sideboard. You can do different sideboard stuff if you just want to say, you know what, Naya all the way, we're just going to go 3 colors, and you can just kind of slightly adjust the mana base. It doesn't need too much adjustment because it does run, of course, our Astrolabe in here, which is one of the most powerful common cards printed in the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years. I mean, it's bonkers, right? There's a reason why it's like seeing play in so many different decks is once they added snow mana back in and kind of really pushed this, you're like, hey, I get to draw a card when it enters the battlefield and I get to just filter my mana with this. Sweet. The only downside is me running snow basics instead of regular basics. Doesn't seem like a downside. Why not? So a little bit of mana fixing off of that. So did want to highlight that before we jump into our value creatures. So ETB based effects that exist, and that's kind of a good workaround when you're trying to build a like Yorion style of deck. One easy one, Night of Autumn, which most people should be familiar with. You can gain life, you can make it bigger, you can destroy something, at least an artifact or enchantment, not creatures unless it's an artifact or an enchantment creature. So value engine in that regard of it can do so much. So if that's out there, hey, I can kind of keep myself alive, kind of value it out like that. One of the most important ones, though, for this type of list, this sort of Court of Calling style deck, is Eternal Witness. So that's the ETB, return a card from your graveyard to your hand. I love being able to use Eternal Witness to get me back a Court of Calling, get me back an Eldritch Evolution, just kind of get me a way to kind of get my combo going. But you can always go for value off of Eternal Witness, right? You can be like, all right, I'll get a Path to Exile. I'll get a creature back that might have died earlier and kind of play the long game. And Yorion is kind of built for a long, grindy game because you're having 80 cards in your deck. The other sort of value ETB based effect that we've got in this would be our Stoneforge Mystic. So, enters the battlefield, search your library for an equipment card, reveal it, put it to your hand, pay 2, tap it, put the equipment from your hand onto the battlefield. Leads us into, okay, what are the 2 best equipment cards in Modern? Well, that would obviously be Batterskull, because most people ran Batterskull when you tie it with Stoneforge Mystic, because on turn 3, being able to play a Batterskull seems pretty great. Not always the case when you have 80 cards, and you might not get it on turn 2, but hey, that's okay. Then our other one is Sword of Fire and Ice. Now, there are so many other swords that exist, but Fire and Ice is really good because of the extra value of being able to draw cards, and you can just dome somebody for 2 damage or a creature, depending on where you want to kind of send that shock value at them. So, little important one to note. Again, based on your meta and how things are going, you can always adjust and have a different sword if you really want, but Sword of Fire and Ice is kind of above the rest in some regards. And plus there's, you know, some important creatures that you might want to have protection from, right? Protection from red can be really important with all the removal. There's some blue creatures that run around that might be troublesome, so let's think about that. Now, the way this sort of list works, and if you're not familiar with previous versions of Kiki Chord, it's basically ramp up, be able to play our combo. But because you have so much value, we have some other value creatures. Now, there's another kind of ETB one that we can be able to talk about. It's our Seasoned Pyromancer here. So, Seasoned Pyromancer, another ETB. You can be able to discard 2 cards, draw 2 cards, and then whenever you decide to be discarding non-land cards, you get to create some tokens. You get to create a 1/1 red elemental. And then you can, of course, pay 5 mana and exile Seasoned Pyromancer from your graveyard to create more tokens as well. So just, again, that kind of value engine is available for them. Non-ETB value cards that exist in this sort of list would be our Voice of Resurgence. Really, really good. You think about kind of, hey, your opponent's going to be playing spells. Well, if they're playing them during your turn, you get a token that's power and toughness is equal to the number of creatures you control. Also, if Voice of Resurgence dies, you get a same token that's has an elemental creature with power and toughness equal to the number of creatures you control. And when you're playing 29 creatures, this guy can get pretty big. Now, we've got ramp to go along with all these guys here. Of course, we've got Birds of Paradise. Hey, got to go with the OG bird. We've got a Gilded Goose. Just, again, keeping up with this sort of ramp. Plus, you might have extra mana, get food tokens to be able to gain life off of. If you can't use it for mana later on, can be important, especially with how Modern can go, right? We know how quick people can end up losing the game. So the other one is, of course, our Utopian Sprawl, which is an enchantment. Comes into play, you choose a color. Whenever an enchanted forest is tapped for mana, its controller adds 1 mana of the chosen color. Because it is a 3-color deck, right? You can be like, all right, well, I'll add white because that's most of my low drop stuff. I'm going to want to be able to cast things like Restoration Angel, or you can be like, you know what? I need 3 red to be able to cast Kiki Jiki next turn, so I need to make sure my Utopian Sprawl is naming red so I can just kind of ramp into it. The other thing we talked about earlier is the Astrolabe being in there for that kind of mana fixing. Not necessarily ramp, but the fixing is important. Kind of, I lump it into that category. Other such value-related things, Magus of the Moon is in here. Non-basic lands are mountains. That's also another reason why you're going to have the Astrolabe in here. You're going to have all these basics in this sort of list, is because you can shut down a lot of 3-color decks that exist in Modern that want to be able to have a bunch of shock lands and a bunch of fetch lands and try to do your mana fixing a normal way. Well, guess what? Now those are mountains. The other kind of way about it is Linvala's in here. You know, MVP if you're thinking about playing against activated abilities, and let's be honest, there's a lot of activated abilities that people can be playing in Modern. So having a nice little 4-drop in here, 3/4 flyer, seems pretty good. And then of course our combo itself, right? We cannot forget about the buddy of Restoration Angel and Kiki Jiki Mirror Breaker. So if you're not familiar with how this works, Restoration Angel is a 3/4 flyer. When it enters the battlefield, it gets to flicker something and then return it back under the player's control. So you say, hey, here's my Restoration Angel, here's my Kiki Jiki. I will tap my Kiki Jiki, make a copy of Restoration Angel. The copy comes in, flickers Kiki Jiki, he enters untapped, and you get to continue to make copies until you are satisfied with enough damage and swing in and kill your opponent. So how do we get out this combo to make that work? Well, we have 8 spells to allow us to help get to that point. Court of Calling, the OG kind of tutor creature effect for these Modern-based decks. You know, we've talked about the chord-based strategies that have existed. There's been a lot of variations of the chord-based decks that have existed in Modern, but this is kind of the OG when you think about it. So, costs 3 green to be able to play, and then you've got your X. X, of course, is going to be the converted mana cost of the creature that you're trying to find. So in this regard, probably 4, probably 5 to be able to get out your combo and kind of win. Now, early on, you can be able to play this to not get your combo piece and just get a value creature, something like Stoneforge Mystic, you know, things like that, and just say, we're going to just play a longer, grindier game. And you can go that route. Now, the Convoke is important for this because you can tap your own creatures to be able to reduce the cost of the X spell, right? So when you're playing things like our Seasoned Pyromancer, hey, I can make a bunch of tokens. Sweet. I can then tap those tokens to help me cast my Court of Calling to be able to get my Restoration Angel. The other option, because we've got these lower cost creatures, you see a lot of our converted mana costs up in those 2, 3 areas. Well, we've got our Eldritch Evolution as our other kind of find our combo piece ability here. So 3 mana, pretty simple and easy to be able to come by when you're having ramp and stuff like that. So double green and a colorless. You can sack a creature. You have to sack a creature to cast this spell, an additional cost. Search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost that is X or less. Hey, it seems good. Where X is 2 plus a sacked creature's converted mana cost. So basically, it's just like ramping up, right? So if I'm going to be saying, all right, well, I'm going to sack my Birds of Paradise. So, okay, I'm going to find a 3 cost or less. Okay, I'm going to sack my Voice of Resurgent. Then I'll get my token, and oh, now look at this, I can be able to find my 4 costs. Seems good. Oh, I've got an Eternal Witness, I'll sacrifice that, be able to get my Kiki Jiki. You get the picture. So very important in this type of tutor creature effects that exist. So again, value engine is the way that it works. You have to have 80 cards, so you need a lot of mana to be able to kind of get there. 29 lands are in here. Really, you see there's a lot of fetch lands. And that's kind of how you have to play this sort of deck, because you want to kind of filter through things. Do want to make a note, though, that we do have one of the new triomes in here because, hey, being able to cast red and white seems good. The black is also important for sideboard-related instances, and you have the cycling if you're flooded out. But you'll see things like, all right, the Vista's in here, all right, Grove, just like most of the lands that are related to Naya colors, that red, green, and white, you're going to be seeing in this sort of list. So I'm not going to take too much time to kind of go over that. Now, I'm going to talk about our sideboard stuff briefly, and then talk about kind of ways to interact with this sort of deck. Talk about, you know, why this deck's fun, why you might want to play 80 cards over 60 cards as we kind of go through things. So really, when it comes to sideboard stuff, it's like removal and protection, disruption. That's sort of where we're at, kind of thing. Protection, Veil of Summer, it basically gives you hexproof, and your permanent's hexproof. And then if your opponent was able to cast a blue or black spell this turn, you also get a draw card. So again, that's sort of just value. Seems good. We've got kind of value just staying alive. Scavenging Ooze also works against graveyard-based decks. Argyle here, again, it's sort of that, hey, I can mess with my opponent's graveyard, I can mess with my opponent's creatures, I can make tokens, I can gain life. It's just a super powerful card, and a reason why a lot of people are running it, because I can do so many things with this. I choose to, seems great. Or if I have a bunch of mana, I could just do all this stuff. Why not? Our other, of course, Sin Collector, be able to get rid of an instant or sorcery from our opponent's hand, you know, things like that. Again, Magus of the Moon, more disruption. Night of Autumn, I kind of clump it in with Scavenging Ooze of, hey, just sort of value. How are we going to keep going? Fiery Justice, removal more or less. And then our Questing Beast is in here. So really, the deck itself was a value-based deck when it was 60 cards, and you probably could have comboed off a little bit easier. Now you basically get to stretch it out. If you're going to play Yorion, you should be running the Stoneforge Mystic package. Just being able to have something powerful early on is a big deal. So like this, turn 2s, turn 3, saying, okay, well, I might not have a Court of Calling, I might not have an Eldritch Evolution, I might not have my Restoration Angel, I might not have my Kiki Jiki. So how am I going to get to the stage where I can get those things? Well, a great way to do it is Stoneforge Mystic, and just kind of keep the grind fest going, being able to kind of drag it out on the back of Stoneforge, on the back of Voice of Resurgent, and even sneaking in there with your Magus of the Moons, you know, just delay. Seasoned Pyromancer coming out and just delay, okay, combo win. That's the sort of game plan that it's gone into now, instead of the, okay, ramp, combo win as the 60 card. So you can kind of judge it based on that of your sort of play style. Would you rather drag the game out a little bit longer to get to where you need to be, or do you want to be a little bit quicker? So you just sort of have to judge it and base it off of those two main things. Now, the main thing to kind of stop this sort of deck is to stop your opponent from being able to search. So things like Grafdigger's Cage is a great way to be able to do that, to sort of shut down the ability for Court of Calling, Eldritch Evolution to kind of put creatures onto the battlefield that way. But when you're doing that route, you have to be aware of just the power of some of the creatures that are in here, right? We keep talking about Stoneforge Mystic. We keep talking about our Seasoned Pyromancer. I know Voice of Resurgence is in here. Now, those are things to kind of mess with people. The other thing is, because it's a value-based deck, you can find specific tools off of your Eldritch and your Court of Calling. All right, so if you go, I'm playing against the combo deck, hey, here's an Eidolon. You can't play more than one spell anymore. Sweet. Oh, I'm playing against a deck that has a bunch of different colors in there. Look, I'm playing a 3-color deck, playing a 4-color deck. Sweet. Guess what? Enjoy your mountains. All right, so you have ways to delay based on how the deck is going, and that's why this deck is so powerful, is because it's a toolbox deck. You find the right tool for the right situation. So I think it's definitely something to consider if you're wanting to play Companion the way that it was originally designed. I put it in air quotes because it has now since tweaked and changed, and most of the people aren't playing companion this way. But if you're looking to play of having that extra card and be like, oh, look at this, I feel like I'm doing something crazy by having an extra card that I can just add to my hand later on, this is the way to go about it. There are some, of course, Lurrus decks that are still existing, but most of the time the players have decided, I'm just going to run this main board, and I'll run like 3 copies of it. Why do I need just that 1 copy over there? Nope. So you're on pretty sweet, and I do recommend you guys picking up some of the cards if you haven't, or tweaking your existing Kiki Jiki style decks to kind of fit this new 80 card style. Have you guys tried this out yet? Let me know. Let me know what you're thinking about what's going on in the modern meta. How do you like companion going on right now? That's the biggest kind of question mark, I feel like, with the new change. Do you like the cards that are coming out? So much crazy stuff happening in Magic right now, but that's going to be it for this episode. If you guys have not yet, please consider hitting that subscribe, follow button, all that good stuff. You can see down below there are links. We're going to continue to be posting up at least 1 new modern meta breakdown every single month, so keep an eye out for that. We're doing podcasting work over there. You can see links down in the description if you're interested in seeing kind of more longer form as well as short form content that we're doing, not just Magic, but we're going to be expanding it out to other games and other stuff. So that's it for us tonight, guys. Thanks for tuning in and watching, and I'll see you guys next game.